Oh, we're live. There we go.
Am I live?
That was easy, wasn't it? Hi, hello,
Hello.
and welcome to our Three Ravens Book Club live stream for our October into November 2024 novel. This one, Pine by Francine Toon. So pretty, isn't it?
It's a gorgeous book. Yeah, I really like this book. It felt very pleasing in the hands. It's a good size and shape.
Now, confession, dear Three Ravens listeners, and particularly hello, Mary. Hi. I haven't read this one. I ran out of time. So all the pressure is on Eleanor.
That's completely fine. And hopefully on our listeners' feedback on the book as well. Hopefully we can have a good discussion.
Most definitely. So we should start in the tried and tested way with the first general question. How did you feel about this book? So if you would like to write any responses or thoughts to the novel in general, please pop them in the chat box and we will obviously address them as the time comes.
Absolutely.
Eleanor, we should start with your view. How did you feel about this book? Did it evoke many feelings?
I had some mixed feelings about it, actually. I read it quite quickly. It's not the shortest novel, but it didn't feel long.
Yeah, I was convinced that I would have time to just knock through it, but this week...
I think it's 300 pages or so, though, so it's a bit longer than it looks, if you see what I mean. I felt it took a while to get going, with quite a lot of the action, as it were, packed into the last third of the book.
So it's a bit sneaky.
It's a little sneaky in that respect. And that's not all bad, because I think something Francine does really excellently well is create an atmosphere. I was very transported to this remote part of the Scottish Highlands, absolute dump of a place, with all these kind of lowering pine forests and snow and very inclement weather, and none of it's very nice. It's never described as being beautiful or, good to look at in any way. It's all a bit of a mess,
which is quite interesting. I mean, whenever I've gone to Scotland, it's rained.
Yeah, I think it inevitably rains. Whenever you go on holiday in England, it rains. So.
It's probably the odds. Yeah.
Exactly.
Unless you're doing it right in the summer. But yeah, true. So it's a bit rainy, a bit bleak, but I'm imagining that suits the subject matter.
Yes, absolutely.
Because from my understanding, I just read about the book, and when I put it forward to the book club, I was like, this one looks like it's a really good one. Firstly, because it's been praised widely, put forward for loads of different awards. It was definitely a bestseller, but obviously love a stag and love a hare. So we're into places where I'm like, okay, are we evoking the folkloric? Are we evoking folk horror? But when I asked you, is it a folk horror book? You said,
yeah, half. I'd say it's a folk. There's no stags in the book, so that's a completely misleading
lies
image.
A cover of lies.
The stag of lies. There's a rabbit or two in the book, but mainly as food. So I think those are nice images to have on the cover, but they don't necessarily relate to the plot.
Sure.
I can think of other things that would relate to more. I mean, the Pine Forest works.
Yeah.
Is it a folk horror? Yes, it is, I think. It's also a bit of a crime novel. It's a bit of a murder mystery and a bit of a psychological who's done what, who's seeing what, who's crazy sort of novel.
Okay. And in terms of the basic setup for the book, what happens in Pine, how does it begin, and just to give people a flavor of where it goes if they haven't read it, like I haven't, what's the sort of setup?
So the narrator, well, it's third person present, but the narrator is told from the point of view of a 9-year-old girl called Lauren.
Okay.
So it's very much through a child's eyes. So we see what Lauren sees. We understand the world the way Lauren understands the world.
Okay.
So automatically, it's not like she's unreliable per se. It's more that her life experience doesn't allow her to see things that the reader necessarily infers from what she sees. But she's a savvy little girl. She's very smart.
Well, I think in order to maintain an entire 300-word novel from the perspective of a 9-year-old, I mean, immediately I'm like, oh, I have doubts about that. I have worries about that, because a 9-year-old's vocabulary isn't necessarily...
But it's not first person.
Right, okay.
So we I think she gets away with it.
Mm.
So Lauren lives alone in this absolute dump of a sort of
alone.
Sorry, alone with her father.
Okay, I was going to say
she doesn't live alone. Well, actually,
Mm.
she lives with her father. Her mother is gone.
Right.
We don't know if she's gone or she's dead.
Okay.
Both are suggested
Mhm.
at certain points. Lauren has never seen a picture of her mother, so she doesn't know what her mother even looks like.
Okay.
She's been completely, it's like she's gone from their lives.
So she's living in a not very nice place, just with her dad. A mum's gone, and it sounds like it. To be honest, that sounds like a really tough way to be growing up.
And dad is depressed and drinking and really struggling to parent and hold down work and manage a household and live on his own. So when I say Lauren lives alone, Lauren is often neglected by her father. She's often forgotten by her father in his sort of alcoholic blackout stages.
So that immediately is going to create a certain amount of sympathy for her as a character, and then fold in this crime storyline, and you're off to the races, I'm guessing.
Yes. She's bullied at school, so she's got a lot of hostility going on from outside sources. It's like her environment is truly hostile.
Right.
The house is moldy, it's stinky. She can't get her clothes to smell nice, although she tries to wash them because the house smells bad. There's like a persistent drip and sort of this idea of nastiness.
Sounds quite gothic.
Around. It is quite gothic, yes, Scottish Gothic.
Scotchic.
Does that work?
Scotch Gothic.
Yeah.
Anyway, so okay, how do you feel about that book? Mixed is Eleanor's response.
Yes, I liked a lot about it, and I liked the setup. I just felt I had a few unanswered questions, and I felt the plot, as it were, could have kicked in a little bit earlier.
Sure.
There might have been a few extraneous characters, a few unanswered questions, just a few little things where I wasn't sure. And honestly, I will be perfectly honest, it was not an uplifting novel.
Right.
And I had just come off the back of reading another quite gory, violent, and quite sad making novel. So it was kind of two back to back that I found lacking in joy.
Yeah, sure.
And Pine is lacking in joy.
Okay.
For sure. There are some small glimpses, but they are small, and it's a bit heartbreaking, given that her glimpses of joy are so little compared to the wider awfulness of her life.
Interesting. So Bethan's just said, I agree. At first I kept wondering when the plot would kick in.
Yeah, it feels like 2/3 of setup, right? And then you just get, oh, there's an investigation. Oh, we were doing this thing. Quick, solve the murder right at the end. And it does ramp up the tension a little bit when Anne-Marie disappears. But Anne-Marie's been a weird kind of nebulous figure earlier on in the book, and then there's the other girl, Diane, who she's friends with, who's also this strange kind of not perfectly developed character. We get lots of tantalizing hints about these two older girls who Lauren thinks are quite cool, but I don't think they're in there enough.
Okay, interesting. So if we move on to our next questions, the next two questions, we could throw them open to the floor just if anyone wants to type responses. The first of those is, who is this book for? So who's this book for? And then after that, we're going to be answering the question, who's your favorite character and why? So if you have responses to either of those, do please put them in the chat box. Eleanor, though, let's start off with, who is this book for? I mean, it seems to me like it's for female crime fans, just from its marketing material. Do you think?
I think that's accurate.
Right.
Yeah, because there's also a sort of witchy element to it. There's a bit of sort of magic and kind of spiritualism, I guess. A bit of ghosty stuff.
Sure.
The threat is pretty specifically male. Apart, not always. No, I'm gonna wreck on that.
Okay.
The main threat is male,
right?
But there are some sort of subsidiary threats from a little schoolgirl, for example, who's bullying Lauren. She's really vicious and violent towards this poor child, actually.
But even from the setup that you've given, her father is a neglectful male figure.
Yes.
Seems like the book is establishing a kind of world in which a young woman is having, well, a girl, but a young female character is going to have to contend with issues that are presented or being created by men whether it's her father or others, if you see what I mean. And perhaps this girl who's bullying her might be a slight exception to that.
Yeah, I think so. And she's got her male friend Billy, but Billy and her, it's quite clear they're drifting apart, getting different interests.
Right.
Lauren wants to build a house in the woods, and Billy wants to play armies. And although she might have a little bit of a baby crush on Billy, and they've certainly been friends in the past, I think that there's that sort of difference, that drifting, that's working. And then there's Billy's mum, who sort of knows what's going on and is often looking after Lauren, giving her food because they don't have food in the house, and is very much sort of the caretaker figure.
I wonder if it might perhaps be also in part for people who haven't always felt they fit in a way Lauren is celebrating that.
That, I think, is definitely a good point, Bethan, because Lauren's like a witchy child. She knows how to read palms, she can read tarot cards, and she...
So, sorry, she can read palms and tarot at 9?
Yes, because she has a witch's book.
Okay.
A kind of grimoire. It's called the Spaewife's book. Spaewife being a cunning folk word from Scotland, and that's her grandmother or great grandmother, I think. And so she's taught how to do all these magical things. And we find out that her missing mother later down the line was also a bit of a witch, but also, crystal healer, massage therapist, kind of wonderful new age person who you go
I like
to for
that
your
those
trouble.
are threads and ideas in the story.
Yeah, and so Lauren has these skills, and she's really perceptive. And when she spends most time hiding that from the bullies at school, but when she does show that aspect of herself to other children and the older girls who say, "Oh, do you want me to read your cards?" They think it's really cool.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like when you show the real you, it is celebrated.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you think it's a book that would work for teenagers?
I don't know.
Right.
The lack of... I think she would need to be a slightly older child, honestly. I think in order to work for teenagers, they would need to age her up to be kind of 13, 14.
Sure.
So she was more identifiable. I think a 13 to 14-year-old wouldn't necessarily care about a book about a 9-year-old. Maybe a bit dark. Yeah, I think in parts it is too dark. There's a sort of never explicit but kind of hovering threat of sexual violence.
Well, yeah, of course.
It's never explicit.
No, but that feels like if you're a 9-year-old girl navigating a creepy world, then you imagine on the fringes of that fear. I mean, it would be the similar with a 9-year-old boy, to be honest.
Scare a 9-year-old, to be honest.
Yeah, of course.
And like the vocab is probably a bit advanced. She uses she's sort of cusping on literary fiction in places. She's got some lovely turns of phrase.
Sure.
I also, but then again, from a sort of crime perspective, I know how popular detective fiction has been for younger readers.
Yes.
I mean, the immense runaway success of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder has been kind of astounding. Like, young readers freaking love that book.
Yeah, they do.
So Lauren herself is not that instrumental in the investigation. Things sort of happen to her because she's 9.
Yeah.
Well, don't happen to her because her father's abandoned her. You know?
Yeah, sure. Interesting.
So maybe I could see like potentially young adult readers if she was older.
Right.
Because most young adult fiction tends to be marketed at sort of 16, 17-year-old. It's that kind of Bildungsroman age.
Do you think the book really benefits from the fact that she is 9? Or would it be better if she was a little bit older?
I think she could be a little bit older,
yeah.
Actually. Yeah. And then her sort of tentative crush on Billy and that sort of aspects of growing up, I think those threads could have been drawn out a little bit more.
I mean, to me, it makes me immediately feel a little bit like, if you've got a 9-year-old reading tarot cards, as people who've worked quite a bit with, kids 7, 8, 9, and then older as well, I mean, it's a challenge to get a 9-year-old to concentrate.
But I appreciate, she's an only child. She's grown up kind of parenting her father.
Yeah.
She's extremely solitary. She's had to be very savvy. She regularly makes their dinner, gets their clothes ready, sorts her dad out because he's in an alcoholic stupor. Like, it's a child who's had to grow up very fast because she's been neglected, which... I think, obviously, as adult readers, we're going full child line immediately. That was what I wanted to do. I was like, neighbour, come on, call the authorities. This man is not capable of having a child.
Yeah. well, that obviously is from a narrative perspective, it's just an automatic button to push to go, we feel enormous sympathy, right? We feel sympathy, we feel alarm.
It's not, her father's not unsympathetic, and we do get his point of view.
Yeah.
He's a point of view character in the book as well. So we sort of start to see things from his side of things. And then you feel sorry for him as well, of course, because he's struggling too.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something very unreliable about him because of the blackouts and because of him never disclosing to us when it's his point of view whether his wife has left or whether she is dead.
Well, part of the setup, if he's an unreliable and often absent male figure in the life of this little girl, the immediate question is he the murderer from step one?
Yeah.
That would be your kind of big red herring normally in a book like
and
this one.
that is what the book is selling us, the red herring of has he in a blind drunken stupor become a killer of his wife and then later of another girl.
Okay. All right. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, and that then I guess leads us to your favorite character and why.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this all day, trying to figure out what to say, actually. I suppose it's Lauren.
Well, she seems like the star of the show.
She's the star of the show, and I think you're meant to. I like the figure of the absent mother who's described in quite a lot of detail as being, very different, very much goes her own way, doesn't care what people in the small-minded folk horror-esque village think of her.
Sure.
I think the two older girls, Anne-Marie and Diane, if there'd been a bit more, I could have got more into them.
Sure.
Yes.
But because so much of the book is focused on Lauren, she in a way necessarily becomes the star and the most favorite character.
Exactly. I mean, MVP would have to be Kirsty, Billy's mother, because my God, that woman is a saint.
Yeah.
She's just, constantly saying, Lauren, have you had something to eat today? Oh, no, it's fine. I'll get something at home. Okay, but maybe can you just help me with this leftover food here? Here's a sandwich now.
Okay.
And checking up on the dad, Neil, when he goes sort of blind, blackout, and he goes missing at one point. They just can't find him.
Right, okay. So she in a way is the best character.
I mean, she is the best human, I'd say. That would be my argument.
But not necessarily your favourite.
No, I mean, she's very much what I would do as would I know? I'd call child services.
But you probably would intervene personally. I mean,
I think as a good neighbour, you sort of would have to.
Yeah, I think so in this circumstance.
So I think I'll say Lauren because she is an interesting character and have that perspective of this kid who's had to mature because of circumstances.
I can't think of that many books that come from the perspective of a 9-year-old. So that alone is like a massive novelty aspect.
The thing, my frame of reference to compare it to was Atonement.
Right, okay.
The first part, because she's about the same age, isn't she?
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the little girl in Atonement now.
Is it Bryony?
Yeah, I think it is Bryony. Yeah, so I think she's about the same age. So that was my sort of...
That's a good book,
kind of frame
Atonement.
For this one. Yeah, it is a good book.
Okay, so next questions, and if you've just joined the chat, we've been chatting about how did you feel about this book, who is this book for, and your favorite character and why. If you've got any responses to any of that, then do please put your comments into the chat box. We're now moving on to your favorite scene and why, and then the big one, folkiness, history, and magic thoughts. But let's start off with your favorite scene and why. From the sounds of it, from your description, you felt like the final third of the book is where it really ramps up. So I'm imagining we're coming into plot spoiler territory here, and also probably the best scene in the book. Would that be a fair assertion?
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's a sort of long ramp of tension in the last part of the book. I think thinking about in terms of oh God, it's probably when Neil or Niall, I'm never sure actually on this pronunciation. Yeah. In my head it was Neil. It's Niall.
Yeah, Niall, depending on where you're from. I think the Irish call them
Scotland,
Niall.
So not sure.
Yeah,
I went with Neil in my brain.
Sure.
So that's what I'm going with now. He goes, he's had some sort of event and he goes to the supermarket to try and buy some booze and he meets Anne-Marie. Yeah.
Right.
As Bethan says, giving Anne-Marie a lift. Yeah, that whole bit was very, very tense because he's in the supermarket buying a lot of booze, which he's going to drink himself.
Yeah.
Anne-Marie, underage, 16 or so,
Right.
is also buying a bottle of vodka, says she's meeting her dad, and he's like, oh, you sure? Are you okay? Do you want me to give you a lift? And he obviously smells of booze, and she's, I'm not getting in the van with that man. Absolutely not. And it could come from a place of care, and ultimately we find out it did come from a place of care.
Sure.
But because he's unreliable, because he's drunk and he's drunk driving, and she wants to get away from him, and she feels uncomfortable with him, but he persists in attempting to pick her up and eventually gets her into the truck. That whole thing, you're kind of screaming, going, "Oh my God, did he kill his wife?"
Yeah, okay.
Oh God, we need to get Lauren out of there.
Sure.
And that's good, you know. Yeah, you wonder how safe she is exactly, and the answer is not safe because she's in the car with somebody drunk.
Yeah,
shouldn't be in charge of a wheel. But she's safe in a he's not going to rape and kill her sense.
Yeah.
But we don't know that, and that's why that's good. And then she's lost Anne-Marie in the woods, and he's blacked out at the steering wheel, doesn't know what happened. And then that whole sort of section, you're like, has he done something and forgotten? Has someone else done something and he doesn't know because he wasn't awake? Where's she gone? Yeah.
Okay, that sounds really exciting.
And then they find a creepy house in the woods. And so last third.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's sort of where it starts to kick off and really ratchet up.
Exactly.
And, you know, with a crime book, very often what you're expecting is the final revelatory, this is how it all clicks together, j'accuse moment.
Yeah, not handled very well, in my view.
Right.
We don't really see j'accuse. We find out who done it, but he has been, you don't see his perspective afterwards.
Right.
He's injured. I think somebody, is he killed? Oh God, I only read this 3 days ago. But that's how little time that gets given to it.
Right.
You know, and you don't get that big sort of grand denouement. It's after the fact you're told, oh, this happened with Anne-Marie.
Right. Okay.
So,
it's a bit of a shame in a way, because with a crime book, the expectation is that there's going to be some kind of mystery that's going to provide the core novelty of the book.
And there is a mystery. The mystery is the disappearance of Lauren's mother, who she thinks has maybe just left the family, but she later turns out to have been killed by this man.
Right.
So she is dead. And we see Lauren's mother because she appears as a ghost. And that happens all the way through the book too.
Okay, well that's cool.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is cool.
That's an interesting and novel concept. I mean, we have encountered it a little bit before. We encountered it even in The Sorceress Comes to Call, right? The idea of a ghost coming in and to help solve a mystery.
The really cool and interesting ghost mechanic in Pine is that people interact with this ghost, but afterwards, the only person who can remember that the ghost has been there interacting with them is Lauren.
Okay.
So she will have a conversation about, oh, do you see that woman over there with somebody? And then when she refers to it afterwards, they're like, what are you talking about, Lauren?
Oh,
okay. So she's the only one who remembers her mum.
No, so they all see her as an unreliable kid. And
they're just like, there's nothing. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Interesting.
And because Lauren has never seen her mother, she doesn't know what her mum looks like. So she doesn't know the ghost of her mum.
Awesome. That's a great idea.
And the ghost's not malevolent. She's trying to help her daughter. She's trying to help them solve the crime and is ultimately a force for good.
With you. But I suppose typically in a crime novel, you've got your A plot, which is, the big murder or what have you that everyone's trying to solve. Then the B plot, which is often a secondary crime or something that's happened historically. And what happens across the course of these of the book is these two converge to become one in the same, which sounds exactly like what's happened here.
But you kind of get the B plot for 2/3 of the book.
Yeah.
Because we have no sense for 2/3 of the book that Anne-Marie is going to be in any danger.
Sure.
The danger is past, like 9 years ago, Christine vanished.
So the book is a little bit more dominated by vibe than it is by story.
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
With you. All right. And in terms of folkiness, history, and magic, I mean, quite a lot of what you've said would suggest to me that this is certainly a book that's got some aspects of like these
It's very
themes.
folky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very folky. The whole book starts with Lauren and Billy going guising. So
Oh,
trick or
cool.
treating,
Yeah.
but with a bit of a different thing. This Geising tradition is that they'll get dressed up and they go to people's houses and then they do a party trick, they do an act.
Oh,
so Lauren
fun.
sings a song and Billy tells some jokes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but they start like in disguise as these kind of, she's a vampire, and I can't remember what he dresses up as actually.
But that's fun. That's a
might be
really
clown
cool
or
idea.
something. Yeah.
And so is there music in the book as well in terms of folk?
Yes, there is music.
Great.
There is a Kaylee band.
Oh, yeah.
And Neil is a musician.
Right.
And yes, so there's songs, and we're told about the children in the primary school learning to play basics on the fiddle.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so, and it's kind of a how far have you got with the fiddle thing?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so music, absolutely a big thing.
That's fun.
We get a sense of the sort of folk year, but we're told like, oh, Christine used to celebrate the Beltane bonfires, and she used to do these things on Samhain and stuff.
That sounds great.
Yeah, no, it's extremely folky. It's got a lot of folk tropes.
Wonderful.
Woven through.
Oh, well, that's good. So like a 3 out of 3 for folkiness rating.
Yes.
Excellent. How about history? It's a bit of a weird one because it sounds like it's a fairly modern novel.
It's set in the recent past. So I think it's set in the early 2000s.
Yeah, is the mobile phone, I'm guessing, isn't a feature?
No, the mobile phone is a feature actually, so it must be later. That's a very good point. Yeah, so it must be the late 2000s.
Yeah.
It's slightly before now.
Yeah, smartphones?
No.
Right, so we're in that spell
just
cellular
texting.
phones before smartphones.
The kind of phones we would have had at like 17.
Yeah, so you are talking about turn of the millennium-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, showing my age, but there we are.
No,
yes.
I think that's about the right time.
Yeah, so that's in the books. So it's not very historical.
Yeah, okay. But in terms of that sense of time and where you're located, reasonably strong, nothing that strikes you as, well, I think it sounds interesting from what you've said about the folk and historical haunting the present and being an influence on people's lives.
And there is this sense that this is a place that has not moved on.
Right.
Like they're teaching the little children all of the old songs.
Mm-hmm.
They're still kind of going through all of the old motions.
But that's interesting though, because we would tend to think about that as a positive and enriching thing, connecting people to their past. Yet it would seem like the community as described in this one isn't necessarily a model that most of us would like to adhere to.
No, and you get the sense that they are suspicious of outsiders. Like Anne-Marie goes to university in Edinburgh and gets a tattoo, and it's like, Laura. And nobody liked Christine because she was from the city and she did weird things, and she was basically a hippie.
Right.
But they didn't like her and said she was a witch.
Okay.
And Lauren's a witch too because she's her mother's daughter. So there's that sort of sense of from the village, very isolated, yes, very kind of could be anytime, anywhere.
Yeah, okay.
As long as it's in the middle of nowhere.
Sure. And technology isn't so advanced that it solves the crimes
and there's also
for
not
you.
Signal as well.
Sure.
Obviously it's the Highlands. So.
With you. And then that leads us on to magic.
There's a healthy dose of magic in this book.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. So Lauren describes magic that she's learned from the Spey Wife's book, and she actually performs some magic. She does a freezing spell on her bully at one point. So sort of freezing her and putting it in the freezer, one of those classic kind of banishing rituals. They talk about candle magic. They talk about various different rituals that she's done or participated in. She's got worry dolls, which she talks to. The house is full of crystals left over from her mum and that kind of thing. So yeah, the magic is strong.
Oh, that sounds really good. Okay. I mean, it sounds like there is a lot in this book. It just seems like maybe there's a structural problem with how it's plotted.
That's exactly what I think.
Yeah.
I think it should have got kicked in a bit sooner.
Sure.
But there is lots to like, as I say.
In a way, at times, only the occasional reference to technology makes it feel modern. I mean, this is a question I'm going to throw out. Would it benefit from perhaps even being set further in the past?
Yeah, because you could do without the phones.
Yeah.
And they watch the TV.
Yeah. But if you were to set it in the 19th century or the 18th century or the 17th century, would it lose anything?
Yes, because I don't think that people minded about their children being out unsupervised and stuff. I think you wouldn't get the sense of the neglect aspect quite so much. Right,
so there's that post-satanic panic, the children.
Yeah, I think that's our modern sensibilities going, oh my God, he's a neglectful parent. But actually, in 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if it even would have felt
yeah
bad.
I mean, you know, if you're a child of the 70s into the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
you're used to spending a lot of your time on your own from
Yeah,
quite a young
exactly.
age and
I
making
think
your own
children
decisions about
growing
where
up
you
today,
go.
it's quite a different world, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely. Yeah.
Well, with the rise of technology, the danger is so much more.
Well, yeah,
Honestly.
and also, you know, there's the sense that you always know where your children are because there's an app that you're tracking.
You're
them all the time.
literally stalking them.
I'm so happy that those didn't exist when I was a kid, and now for much greater degrees of mischief.
Yeah, and I mean, this book doesn't have apps. It's pre-smartphone,
Yeah.
so it's not like they can just go, oh, Anne-Marie's just popped off to the scary forest.
But I do think, and it's a bit of a side point, that it's one of the most challenging parts of writing a good crime story now.
Yeah.
In that people basically have to get rid of phones. Phones, like children's fiction, it's part of the rule is you have to get rid of the parents somehow. In crime fiction, modern crime fiction.
In that sense, this is children's fiction.
Yeah, well, but you know, children about, you know, stories about children very often, but, you know, very often it's an orphan. Obviously, Harry Potter, which has also got mystery aspects, whatever. It's about getting rid of the parents. And, you know, Lord of the Flies or anything. You know, Lord of the Flies isn't a children's book, but nonetheless, it's
a book about children.
Yeah, it's one of those big ideas: is how do you detach children from their parents to then allow drama to happen? And with crime now, it's very rare to see a really well-told crime story where phones are still a function. In fact, one of the points of tension in a modern crime story, and it drives me crazy, is, oh my God, I can't get signal. And it's like, I don't care that you can't get a signal. It's so boring.
But also, it's 2024, 5G.
Yeah,
you can get signal pretty much everywhere.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that's true. Yesterday, I was working in the woods, wasn't I? And I didn't have signal.
That's true, yeah.
So, yeah.
I think more, I've run out of data and I can't afford to buy more in this world.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, that's definitely something I can empathise with as a teenager.
More scary than no signal.
Okay, so to be honest then, you know, it's not a historical novel, but it sounds like its grasp on history is solid. Its folkiness really good, and magic really good.
Yeah.
So this is all quite impressive. All right. So the next two questions, if people want to contribute, thoughts on the writer's style. Was it appropriate? And what did you think of the plot/storytelling? I mean, we talked a little bit about plot/storytelling.
Yeah, I feel like we've sort of covered that.
But we'll do it in a bit more depth in a minute. But, you know, thoughts on the writer's style. Was it appropriate? Because, you know, I'll say I haven't read the book, but the thing that makes me feel skeptical is this 9-year-old omniscient narrator perspective.
Well, yeah, because we're in her mind, but it's not first person. It's not jarring.
No,
I didn't think it was.
Okay.
I was completely fine with it. I like her style. It's not. She's quite sparse. She's quite economical.
Yeah.
Her descriptions are very nice. The sense of place and atmosphere is really strong.
Yeah.
You know, I was really there. Her descriptions of smells are just wonderful. I mean, they're all bad, the terrible smells. Yeah, I was with them. I was smelling the smells, and I think that's very appropriate because this kind of folk horror needs to be sensory.
Yeah, it does,
doesn't it? Because that's what starts to be scary.
Horror
about
writing
it,
benefits from sensory writing.
Yeah, and she's good at that. Has she written anything else actually, Francine Toon? Or is this
I think this is her debut.
Because I would read her again. I wouldn't write her off.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Well, I mean, considering the book is like massively praised, it's her first book.
That's the first one. Yeah, I definitely like to see what she produces next.
Yeah. She's done poetry as well.
Yeah, so there's a sense of that poetic voice coming through a little bit too.
With you.
I think she's taking care not to make it too highfalutin because she's got Lauren.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's always going to be a slight anchoring factor, isn't it? In terms of like having a 9-year-old that you've got to try and
she uses a little bit of dialect quite well, sparingly, but it works.
Sure.
It's just, you know, little things which help reinforce a sense of place.
Yeah.
So it's not written in kind of rich, rollicking Scotch nightmare dialect. Bram Stoker, I'm looking at you.
Bram Stoker, but also,
it's just got little phrases that help you set it.
Yeah, one of the most egregious aspects of Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge, right?
Far free.
You're far free. So annoyingly written.
Which readers found so irritating that Thomas Hardy, in the second edition of the book, wrote a long apology for. But it was like a sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
It's like, people may say they find Farfrae annoying and actually inaccurate, but I've listened to loads of Scottish people and I'm right.
Yeah. Good old
Hi,
Thomas.
Thomas Hardy from the Southwest. I'm right.
Boss. Gotta love that guy.
Yeah, I do love the guy, but he does come across as a pompous ass in that particular piece of
certainly.
writing.
So, okay, I think it's really interesting the way you're describing it is that it's a very beautifully written book that actually really only falls down in terms of its themes and its ideas, its concepts, the kinds of threats you're encountering, and even the central like idea for the plot. All of that sounds really good. It's just an issue with how it is actually parceled out. Like the weighting of the plot.
That's what I would say. That was my main issue with it. And I think the ending's rushed and a little bit mishandled.
Sure.
I would have liked to have had another go at the ending.
Okay. And in terms of like, because the way that I've understood it from your description is it's not that there's an absence of things happening, but in those first 2/3 it is mostly her life, what she's doing, establishing what's going on, her friendships. When you establish plot threads like those early in a novel, there is then an expectation that come the end of the novel, you're going to have those resolved. So, for example, Billy, she starts the book with Billy.
We're told very early on she's going to go up to the woods with Billy and work on the hut they're building.
Right. What happens at the end of the book? Is there a Billy resolution?
Nah. They're just stay friends. Billy goes to Disneyland at one point.
Right.
When they play a couple of times, Billy just wants to play armies. He doesn't want to play what she wants to play.
Yeah.
They stay. She stays in his house. She sort of thinks about going to have a cuddle with him, but she doesn't because they're 9.
Sure.
And
still, 9-year-olds cuddle.
It's not really resolved.
Yeah.
And I don't know about everybody else, but because of the abrupt nature of the end, I didn't feel like I was given enough clues as to who the murderer was.
Right, okay.
So it was like, no, I can see that. But I can see that now, not because you've necessarily laid the breadcrumbs for me.
Yeah, is it one of those crime books where you would never have suspected the suspect until they're revealed?
Yeah, I didn't suspect him. Well, because we're given false leads elsewhere, but they're too good.
Yeah.
So they give us a false lead towards a character called Alan, who's an older man in the pub, who's and they say, his PE teacher's a bit weird back in the day, and we're not really. It's the killer is another guy called Sandy Ross, and he's like Neil's more successful and more good looking friend who's constantly like, you should do something nice for your daughter, and like giving Lauren £5 but not being especially creepy or anything. Like you don't necessarily, and Sandy's taking out the beautiful GP who Neil quite fancies, and he's going on a date with her, and Neil's just like, oh, I'm a failure, Sandy's a success. That's what you get from Sandy.
Yeah.
But then at the end it's like, oh no, he's the murderer.
Okay.
Was he? Okay.
And
Missed that. I don't know if I read it while too deliriously tired to pick up or something. And somebody please tell me if there were actually loads of clues on Sandy and I missed it.
Sure.
I think I couldn't have worked it out as you don't have enough info. Yeah, same. Exactly.
Yeah, and 100%
don't have enough info to suspect the murderer until you reinterpret everything at the end. Yes, exactly. So when you look at it, you're like, yes, I can see how he was the killer.
And if we think about it from another way, do we want Sandy is impugned as the murderer? Is it then explained as to why he's motivated to kill people in these ways?
We are just told we're kind of left to infer sexual violence.
And that's it.
Yeah.
But he already has it seems like, happy life involving
reasonably happy life. Yeah, he's a good looking guy. He's the leader of the Cayley band. He's doing well. You've got the sense that he's kind of much better off than Neil.
Yeah. So it's not like a alter ego type of, he's got
this. And because you don't see Sandy at the end, you don't get that resolution of like, what did he think? What did he say? How did that all work out?
That's a mess. That's a shame.
It is a shame.
Because again, another key feature of crime is not just who the killer is, but why the killer is. Yes. Right? It's that motive, means, and opportunity set of 3 questions that you then need to seed back through the plot.
Yeah,
and his motive just being, oh, girls.
We get seeded that
You
he is having an affair with Christine before her death, but we don't know if that's necessarily true.
Yeah, but having an affair with somebody, or even being interested in younger women, which, while creepy, is not like unheard of.
No,
that does not make us want to murder her. Do you know what I mean?
But we're told that Christine, although she's an adult, she looks really young, and Anne-Marie obviously is young.
Yeah.
And the GP Katrina, she's just she's not particularly young.
Right.
Just
there's nothing necessarily linking these sexual partners together.
No, they're actually all quite different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not like he has a particular psychopathy or anything where he's
we're just not given enough to know.
That sounds very frustrating.
And, I didn't see him coming.
And so that then opens up another question for me, which is, does the book need the crime storyline, or can it be a book that's effectively a drama about a young girl and her alcoholic father
and the ghost
community?
mother?
Yeah, and does any of that additional stuff actually need to come into the book? Because it feels like that's almost like its own novel or novella that's a trick. Is
it 2 books?
Justifies the vibey nature of. I know she's written like a vibey description of a neglected child, which sounds really interesting, and there's magic thrown in there, and the politics of moving into high school and growing up.
Could it have quite easily become a story about a young girl kind of becoming a witch?
Yeah.
Absolutely, in remote Scottish Highlands village.
Well, this is it.
Yeah, and the older girls could have been in a coven. I mean, I was absolutely expecting that. I don't get it.
That's a shame.
Yeah, and we're trying to discover what happened to Mama Witch, who's gone. Absolutely, it could have totally been a story. Didn't need the other stuff.
But that's really interesting, because you're like, okay, the plot really kicks in with the crimes stuff, where actually there's another book, it seems like, wants to escape. That's a really interesting question. Totally is 2 different stories squished together. Right, so we've kind of got a schizophrenic novel.
Yes, the novel itself is like Neil sober and Neil drunk. 2 totally different people.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's really, really interesting, though, isn't it? And I can see why she would have done it as a means to sell a book, because crime's what sells.
Yeah, people love crime. It's the most popular genre, isn't it?
It is. Crimes and spies are the 2 most popular modern genres, and that's understandable because they are the most recent genres to really emerge in popular fiction, in genre fiction.
Yeah.
So they're still pretty novel as these things go. I just wonder whether maybe the story of a young girl discovering herself and who her mother was through magic might be a harder sell as a trying to get your novel published kind of thing. So if you shove in a killer with dubious motives who's killing women and young girls motivated by sex, well, that feels much more now.
Not very often.
Not very often. Just on occasion.
Just occasionally.
Yeah, in between Kaylee practice.
Yeah.
Then that helps to sell your book, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I think she maybe could have sold it with obviously the ghost mother being like giving her pointers and stuff. She could have sold it with a sort of Lovely Bones angle. That was obviously very popular.
Yeah, it was a really and a good book, I'd say. Film terrible, book good. But the mystery of the mother's death is almost enough of a crime.
Well, because also you don't know she's dead until really late on. When really late on, honestly, she could have left him because you would. But we're not told until right near the end of the book, where the police have come because they're looking for the missing Anne-Marie, and they say, we have found this bothy in the woods, and there are human remains there, and they are your wife.
Right.
But they never found her remains up until this point.
Okay.
And they've got his DNA, because then only at that point we find out that he was investigated for the disappearance of his wife.
Oh.
Even though he didn't know she was dead. She vanished.
I think that also would have been an interesting aspect of the book to establish way earlier, which is he definitely, as he was investigated for the murder of his wife and found he didn't do it. That doesn't mean that he's not necessarily a suspect in future crimes involving the disappearance of women.
It was just, it's inconclusive.
Yeah.
Could have been good to know.
Yeah. Okay.
Because he doesn't know though. He can't tell us.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows what happened to Christine apart from the killer, whose point of view we don't get.
Sure. So it feels like there's a big lump of something at the end that's a bit of a knotted tangle.
Yeah.
Endings, they're the hardest part of books to write.
They sure are.
Going back to Bram Stoker again.
Chaos.
Yeah,
set everything on fire and it's still chaos.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so does the book have clear themes and are they handled well? And just to loop back in case people have recently joined the chat or want to contribute, how did you feel about the book? Who's this book for? Your favourite character and why? Your favourite scene and why? Folkiness, history and magic. Thoughts? Thoughts on the writer's style. Was it appropriate? What did you think of the plot/storytelling? And does the book have clear themes and are they handled well? So it seems to me that one of the plots of the book is femininity.
Yes, to a degree.
Well, this is this is the question. So evidently there are lots of different models of womanhood.
Yeah, that's very true.
And they're some of them ending in tragic ways. Is that theme handled well?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, good. All right, so the idea of female growing up. Then you've got the kind of magic alternate past from what you've talked about. This idea of alternate styles of living, they seem to have been handled well as a theme.
And I think the magic and the folky aspects are handled really well. And they are obviously themes.
Well, that's good.
The supernatural.
How about this theme?
The supernatural is handled well. The ghost of Christine, its appearances and its activities when it doesn't appear, or her, I should say, she's a lady. That's all handled really well. That's good. Like her hauntings, I like how they're done.
But that idea of the natural and supernatural and that meeting point between them does beckon a further question for me, actually, which is religion. Is there a priest in this book? Is there a church in this book?
There is not.
There's no Kirk in Scotland.
No, there is not.
See, now that also stretches believability, right? Because it's very rare that you're going to encounter a Scottish community, no matter how remote, without the church having at least at some point had a stranglehold on the thoughts of the population.
Yeah, no, it's not there.
That's a shame.
It's a real absence.
Because again, the church is sinister often in this kind of mystery and crime narrative.
Often there's a quite scary priest.
And even if the
possibly
church
played by Rory Kinnear.
Even if the church is shut down and been turned into a Wetherspoons or something, the idea that you'd have a Scottish community without a church,
no, it's not.
That's interesting.
There's a single reference.
The idea that you'd have superstition and no Christianity, I don't know. That
it's slightly strange, isn't it?
It is, because the natural and supernatural, the metaphysical, these are themes that all belong together in the milieu. I think it's interesting that she sort of got rid of Christianity and replaced it with alternative lifestyles and witchiness.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
But I also think that you kind of need the, in some way, you need to have the established national church to be there, particularly in a Scottish story, because it is a big, important thread to identify this as an alternate lifestyle. Otherwise, what you're writing is a fantasy book. Is this a fantasy book?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if it's a fantasy book entirely. Bethan's just said, I think someone says they don't go to church as a way of looking down at the main character, but it never comes up again.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't remember that, but I absolutely believe you. But there's no reference of anyone going.
That's weird. That's weird.
And what we don't. I actually, something I did find about the description of place, I didn't get a sense of the village town as a whole. And I think that is in part because it's really spread out.
Right.
Like the houses are quite scattered. They're quite far away from each other. You've got these woods all around and she has to get the bus to go to school. So it's all quite spread out.
But you know what you'd normally find in the middle of town.
Yeah, church. Well, there's a spa. Or Tesco, you know, rather than a church.
But the spa or the Tesco or the grocery store, that would open up because that's the heart of the village, and it wouldn't be very far from the church, where you'd also find the bus stop and the school, of course, because that's how schools tended to be organized.
But you've got the children learning about folk music, but you haven't necessarily got them learning about Jesus.
Yeah. Well, that does make me think it's a fantasy book because, a bit like Thomas Hardy's Wessex or something, you're imagining an alternate world where you're sort of just dialing down to...
I could buy that as a Wessex alternative, actually.
Yeah, so it's like an old Scotland.
Old Scotland,
yeah. That's interesting. Then it doesn't take place in this world, but it takes somewhere slightly different. I like that. And so in terms of its other themes, I mean, another one, we've already talked about the feminine. It seems like the masculine is a theme in this book, and it seems like once again, and perhaps for understandable reasons in fairly modern times, men are coming in for a bit of a general purpose kicking in this book.
Yes and no. I mean, Neil is presented sympathetically.
What's the root of Neil's trauma then? Why is he?
Because his wife's gone. He's he was a sort of sad, lonely, I think slightly prone to depression person.
Yeah.
Met this woman, completely head over heels, absolutely in love, light of his life, kind of sorted him out.
Yeah.
She vanishes out of his life. He falls completely to pieces.
Do we get the sense, though, of if there was any kind of psychological root to his depression that predated?
I think
wife?
It is set up as he's always been a bit lonely. There's also a thing which comes in quite late in the book, that there's something a bit strange about the house that they live in. That some man who lived in the house before went crazy and hanged himself and hacked the staircase to bits. So there's a kind of maybe the house also making him weird.
Okay, all right.
But I mean, I think basically he can't cope.
Yeah.
He's just struggling to hold everything together.
But again, so normally if you're...
so a very relatable kind of person falling to pieces.
Yeah, but if you're a single parent, the typical, this is a big sweepy generalization, but the typical thing that you would do for support is look to your parents. Do we get any sense about where Neil's come from, what his family life is like?
So his dad, I think, is dead. And he doesn't talk with Christine's family,
right? Because
they live far away, and also possibly suspect him of having killed her,
right? Okay.
So he doesn't get any help. So his support network is Kirsty, and kind of Sandy Ross to a degree. That's his support network, and the men he sees in the pub.
Sure. Just say that part about the other homeowner felt like a tag on to the story.
Yeah, it went nowhere, didn't it? It was just like, oh, and by the way, this is a creepy suicide house.
Poor Lauren can't catch a break. Even her house is sad.
Moldy. Yeah, I mean, poor Lauren's probably got mold spores in her lungs at this point.
So that's interesting because, in a way through Lauren, we're engaging a little bit in a growing up story, like a bit of a building.
Yeah, but because she's had to grow up so fast, you kind of skip out some of the important steps on there.
Yeah, but also, normally in a buildings roman, there's a love part of the story that, is kind of not there.
Obviously she's too young.
Exactly.
It doesn't really kick in.
So it's sort of the first part of a trilogy in a way in terms of what that's doing in terms of storyline.
And that we sometimes ask a question like, what do you think happens next? What do you think after the story ends? And I mean, there's two ways of looking at this, isn't there? There's sort of the optimistic ending that, finally getting closure makes Neil pull himself together. He actually manages to ask the hot GP on a date, and she turns out to have always wanted children and be amazing and a wonderful witch mama for Lauren. Yeah, that's the positive ending.
Yeah,
negative ending, it could go very much another way.
Well, his band's going to fall apart.
Child's traumatized.
Yeah. Probably doesn't have enough money to move away from
exactly
community. So yeah, that is a tricky one, isn't it? Sort of what it's trying to deliver for you as a moral. And would you say there is a moral? Because when we talk about the idea of themes being developed and handled, it doesn't sound like, to me, from what you've said, that the theme of masculinity or gender in general, but in terms of what it is to be a good guy, isn't really handled terribly well across the course of this book.
I don't think we're shown a good guy.
Yeah. So what we have is bad guys. Men are bad. Is that?
Yeah. We're not. I mean, we're shown sort of neutral men, I suppose.
Okay.
But none of them
men are neutral or bad.
None of them are great, actually. Because I was thinking, okay, he's a neutral man, and some of the parents of the other children, are they neutral men? well, Billy's dad, no, we're told he and Kirsty are snipping at each other,
Right.
and he's a bit grumpy, so we're not necessarily giving him as a good
Yeah.
guy. And then there's the old men at the pub and the bartender, like people who are sort of slightly suspicious of Neil.
Yeah.
I mean, the good guy that we're presented for most of the book is Sandy, who's the bad guy.
But this is kind of my point, is that in a way it seems like, you know, we're post Me Too. That's a fine thing to just shove into a book, but it's like misandrist, isn't it?
Misandrist,
misandrist. Is there then a moral, is what I was getting towards? What do we learn from this book? What do we take away? Apart from that tarots and crystal healing and all that stuff's really cool.
What do we take away from this book? Because the ending is so rushed and I think a bit of a pickle, I'm not sure what we take away from this book. When I closed it, I was left with a general feeling of don't get in the car with a drunk driver.
Yes,
definitely.
That is good advice.
Maybe on the back in bronze letters, we just write stranger danger.
Yeah.
Yes. That, I mean, super good advice for life, but don't live in a remote community. Don't live in a murder house.
But that's the intriguing
part.
Don't
walk into the woods in the middle of the night in the snow. No.
But these seem like really basic concepts.
Yeah. I was left with a sort of feeling of general bleakness at the end. Like I said, it lacked those shafts of light for me.
Yeah.
I don't mind an upsetting book. I love an upsetting book. I like to have a good cry when I read. I can handle the darkness, but for it to work for me, I need it to have shafts of light.
Yeah.
There need to be glimpses, otherwise it's too bleak.
Right. And so what you end up with is a book where
you end up with like, wow, everything is horrible.
Yeah. So and
I don't see how anyone's going to get out of this awful cycle.
But you therefore end up in a situation where what the book is telling you in terms of its morals are a series of don'ts, right? Warnings about don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. With very few, it seems to me, things to hope for or reach for.
I mean, do lean into your true self.
Yeah.
So your sort of magical power if you're Lauren, and do listen to your ancestors.
Okay.
So you've got your ghost of your dead mother, but you've also got your spay wife grandmother book.
Yeah.
Because they can guide you. Do listen to sort of older women, actually, I guess, in whatever form, because there's we're also given this character Vary, who's a sort of grumpy old lady, and we're later told she knew Christine and she really liked Christine, and Christine helped her out, and maybe she's a bit of a witch as well. Okay,
so listen to older women.
Yeah, basically.
That's the moral of the story.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, you could go worse.
Yeah.
I mean, they tend to be full of wisdom, don't they, older women? Not all of them,
well,
but
full of life experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. That in the box. And also, if you've got other thoughts that you just want to contribute as we wind towards the end of our conversation about the book. I mean, it seems to me like the biggest sort of point of seriousness or the thing that stands out about Pine is really great vibe, bleak, threaded through with magic and folklore and mystery, but it's schizophrenic in that the first half of the book doesn't fit with the second half. As a consequence, what the book establishes in the first part kind of gets squandered in the end.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 2 for that reason.
Yeah.
It's a nicely written book. I was very much drawn into the character's world. I would happily read more by Francine Toon. I did not throw it with rage across the room. I wasn't deeply enraged at all, which is good. But the end is a pickle.
Sure.
So I can't give it 3.
Recommend with caveats. Is that the idea?
I don't recommend. Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, actually, because am I going to pass this one on?
Yeah.
And who to?
I mean, I'm inclined to read it.
Yeah,
just because
I wouldn't mind seeing your thoughts.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting, and I'm sad that I didn't have the time to read it in the end, because obviously, I want to do 3 Raven book club readings, and just the last 2 weeks have ended up being really difficult.
Yeah.
So it hasn't all come together. Didn't quite work. I've been carrying it around for a bit. Eleanor will attest.
And very comforting it is too.
Yeah, it's been in several different rooms that I've also been in with the like. If I get 5 minutes,
you should learn to read it by osmosis.
But I mean, for example, would you give it to your mum to read? No. Right, too bleak.
No, she wouldn't like it.
Yeah, too dark.
She likes crime, and it's not crime enough.
Right.
And no, I wouldn't.
Okay, that's interesting. any other people do have, if you have a Raven rating, do slam it in there. 2 out of 3 sounds reasonably generous.
Yeah, but I don't want to give it a 1 because there's lots to like, and I've enjoyed this discussion about it. It's made me think about it, so I'm not going to give it a 1. And I don't do chicks for I don't do chicks for books.
No, which is half marks.
I'll do them for films.
What do you, if you were to be able to travel through time and talk to Francine Toon slightly earlier and go, do you know what would be really good before you actually publish this? Add this to your draft, change this about your draft. Have you thought about this for your draft? What would you say?
I would say give me more clues if you're going down this crime story route.
Right.
Yeah. So I feel like I've got my own resolution, because we need that, don't we, as readers of crime? We need to feel like, oh, that's not what I thought. But she doesn't give you enough to think anything. I'd also maybe ask for a few more chapters. Yeah, absolutely. I could
bolt on a few more.
I could go for more, because you get so long with the setup, then the actual story is squidged. So yeah, a few more chapters of story and spread them a little bit more thinly.
Because that's the classic structure.
Butter that bread more evenly.
Obviously 5 acts, isn't it?
And this is not a book written in 5 acts.
No.
So I think I'd encourage Francine to go back and do some more.
Do some more, yeah.
Give us a bit more, Francine.
Think about the landing. Okay.
And come back to that end.
Really interesting.
But yeah, I would also say I can't wait to read your next book.
Okay, well, that's good. Excellent. All right. Well, no one else has popped in any Raven ratings, but we're going to leave it at 2 out of 3. Yeah, and then I'll give it a read and see whether I agree.
So what are we reading for our December read, Martin?
The vote has been overwhelming.
What were the choices?
Oh my God, I can't remember them all off the top of my head. I mean, I always put forward 4, but the one that was the runaway lead was A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
Oh wow, we're going proper classic Christmas.
We are going classic
fantastic.
Christmas.
Well, that will be super festive.
And it's a nice.
We might have to dress as Victorians. I quite enjoyed it. I was thinking about today. I was thinking, oh, what can we dress up as for Pine? But I like tartan.
Could have put me in some antlers.
There's no deer in the book.
Yeah, but there is one on the cover. I could. Yeah. We do own bunny ears.
Bit of plaid.
Yeah. I could have been drunk and asleep.
I mean, next time. Christmas Carol, though, we can go full bonnets and mutton chops.
Yeah, we can.
Fezziwig's Christmas party.
Right, that's a deal. That sounds like a good idea. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us for 3 Ravens Book Club, as always. And yeah, next month, A Christmas Carol, read it. And tomorrow morning, our local legends interview with Mark Norman of the Folklore podcast will be coming out, and we'll be talking all about Devon.
Yes.
So hope you enjoy that.
Looking forward to that one.
Okay. Speak again soon.
Bye.
Bye.